Every morning, the countdown begins for the markets with meticulous research and analysis designed to help you capitalize on the trading day. Beaming live from the CNBC TV 18 Motilal Oswal studio.
Good morning, hello and welcome to Bazaar Morning Call. We're coming to you live as always from the CNBC TV 18 Motilal Oswal studios. Bang in the middle of the week, the market's taking its own time, at least here in India, to make up its mind about moving to those fresh all-time highs or not. We have a full day ahead. I'm Surabhi Upadhyay. With me is Nigel D'Souza, and Rima is here with us as well this morning. Hi guys, morning.
Hi, good morning. Well, I was there yesterday and day before. Welcome back.
Welcome back to Rima. So, the mutual welcome backs have happened and it's, nearly a full house now.
Well, that's right, Surabhi. Hope you had a good time in Goa. But as you enjoyed your time off, nothing really moved out here. The markets are more or less flattish. We had one up, one down day. Let's see, what's the road ahead.
Absolutely. So, if you talk about the headlines, they, of course, keep coming in. And once again, we've got one from the U.S. president. So even before we talk about what's happened with the U.S. market, what the dollar's done, etc., the big headline is coming from Trump, and he is talking about tariffs, and he doesn't seem to be too pleased with Japan, for starters. Take a look at what the U.S. president is saying, the latest on tariffs and that July 9 deadline.
I think we're going to have a deal with India, possibly. And that's going to be a different kind of a deal. It's going to be a deal where we're able to go in and compete. Right now, India doesn't accept anybody in. I think India is going to do that. And if they do that, we're going to have a deal for much less tariffs. We have a great relationship, great reliance, and really a great sort of a partnership in a way. But on trade, they've been very unfair. And those days are gone. So what I'm going to do is I'll write them a letter and say we thank you very much. And we know you can't do the kind of things that we need. And therefore you'll pay a 30%, 35%, or whatever the number is that we determine, because we also have a very big trade deficit with Japan, as you know. And it's very unfair to the American people.
Yeah, so not very happy with Japan, but suggesting that a deal with India could happen. It could be a different kind of deal. We know that the U.S. obviously is pushing for market access for agriculture and dairy. That's been the single most important sticky point. But it seems that, something might finally materialize before the 9th of July. Markets in Asia are reacting to this, and we'll talk about that in just a bit, including how the Japanese market is reacting, which is down. But let's actually start with the mothership and look at what happened overnight on Wall Street. Mixed session and a rotation away from tech into other parts of the market like healthcare. That's what we really saw, which is why you're seeing the Dow up about 1%. But the Nasdaq was down about 1%. Speaking of tech, actually, the side headline came in from Jeff Bezos. He's continuing to sell down Amazon stock. He's still the single largest shareholder, but he's selling now stock worth over $700 million. It's not a shock to the market. It's part of a declared sort of a plan. But that's something to keep on the radar as well. By the way, yesterday, the S&P 500 formed what is technically known as the golden cross. That's when the shorter-term moving average crosses the longer-term one. So in this case, the 50 crossed the 200 DMA. Technical experts see this as a sign of strength, but a caveat or a warning here. There have been instances in the past, including in 2019, where the indices, US indices, went on to make a golden cross, and then they fell 10% after that. So never say never. But anyway, that's an important technical pattern to take on board as well. Finally, that big, beautiful bill, at least it's cleared the first hurdle. And markets were reacting to that. It's finally moved through the U.S. Senate, and now it has to go through the U.S. House of Representatives, where it's likely to face some more opposition as well. Promises to add over $3 billion to U.S. deficit, and we'll see how that plays out. Yields actually edged slightly higher because this bill is supposed to be more inflationary. Deficit is a concern. So we had a 2-3 basis points kind of a leg up on the US 10-year yield. Let's see if we can bring the yield back up. It was about 4.24 last I checked. That's pretty much where it kind of ended down. The dollar has been very, very ranged. The dollar index, in fact, intraday fell. There we go. We've got the yield and the dollar. So 4.25 on the yield now. The dollar index intraday fell even below the 96.50 handle, and then there was a bit of a recovery. It's going to be all eyes on the jobs market now, because today you have the private sector ADP report that will come out, and the non-farm payrolls report comes out one day earlier, because Friday, remember, is 4th of July. It's a US holiday. So Thursday is when we get the non-farm payrolls report, and that will pretty much, determine the trajectory from here on. I just want to also quickly point out what Jerome Powell said. He was speaking at an ECB event in Portugal. And he went on to acknowledge that if it hadn't been for the Liberation Day tariffs, then yes, the Fed would have cut rates. And again, the currency market and the bond market were taking note of this. So that war of words between the US President and Powell continues. But he's acknowledging if it wasn't for the tariffs, I would have cut by now. Let's see if they move later in the year. Coming back to our market, the Nifty is continuing to consolidate around the 25,500 level. It'll need a bit of a push, whether it comes from banks or Reliance or IT, we'll have to see. But yeah, that's pretty much been the story. I'll just leave out with the paint sector, no stopping the headlines in the paint sector. The Competition Commission probe on Asian Paints is now a reality. They have initiated an antitrust probe on alleged abuse of dominant market position. It will go on for about 90 days, but paint sector, never going out of the headlines. So plenty of news to digest this morning, guys.
Indeed. I think one number which caught my attention was the GST collections for the month of June. And here we're just putting forth a question. Are some of the recent high-frequency indicators flashing any sort of early warnings on the economy, perhaps suggesting a slowdown? So let's get the numbers up. The GST collections for the month of June came in at 1.84 lakh crore. This is a growth of 6.2% on a year-on-year basis, but it's the slowest pace of growth in more than 4 years. Also, to put it in perspective, 1.85 lakh crore compares with about 2.36 lakh crore in the prior month. So that's one. Secondly, even the passenger vehicle sales have been subdued. We've been talking about it since yesterday, but you can see the pain on the street. So post-market hours, you got Maruti Suzuki's domestic passenger vehicle sales, and they're down close to about 13%. And in fact, barring an M&M, across the board, you can see pressure coming in on the passenger vehicle sales for the month of June. And finally, the third one, and this came out a while back, that's the Q1 advanced tax collection. Again, a barometer of corporate profitability. In Q1, FY26 had gone up by just 3.6%. Again, perhaps pointing to slower earnings growth across some of the key sectors. So that's just one watch point. Other than that, let's get to the flows then. The FIs yesterday net sold about 1,970 crore, while the DIIs pumped in close to about 771 crore rupees. Now, HDB Financial will be listing today. The question is the listing, the debut, going to be as blockbuster as the kind of subscription it's seen? It raised about 12,500 crore, but very strong subscription seen at nearly 17 times. Of course, we'll talk more about auto sales because not just the passenger vehicles, even Hero MotoCorp, for instance, came out with the numbers. And finally, as Surbhi was saying, India-US trade deal, progress on that will be center point. But Nigel, what are you watching?
Well, that's right. We look at the Troika and they are well behaved overnight. If you look at the dollar index, Brent crude prices, as well as the 10-year yield, Mr. Trump's behavior is debatable, but otherwise, these indicators are pretty much well behaved. Trump's taking on Powell, taking on Musk. So we'll have to wait to see what comes out with regard to a trade deal and how do we see the Fed action going ahead. But for the time being, that's in our favor. Let's move on to the next cue there. Yesterday you had some kind of a long build-up on the Nifty bank. And I think that's going to be in a trajectory of its own. So this is the one where I'll talk about a little bit more detail in just a bit. What did the FIs do? Well, they added longs as well as shorts yesterday. Mildly so, though. They added close to 2,000 contracts apiece, both on the long as well as the short side. Though they continue to remain net short, with more than 60% of their positioning on the short side. We look at it in absolute terms as well. Clients, mildly net long. FIs, mildly net short. And that's been the case for the last few trading sessions, though you would like to see some more shorts in the system, because in case we get a favorable deal or something on that front, then you'll have a bigger short covering bounce. For the time being, this is pretty much, okay, very okayish positioning that we're seeing from the FIs. 30,000-40,000 contracts is par for the course. 1 lakh contracts is something that the bulls really latch onto and they hope for some kind of positive news flow. Moving to the PCR, well, we had mentioned a couple of sessions ago, it was at around 1.25. That's cooled off to around 0.9 or thereabouts. So that's closer to the lower end of the range. While the options data should come up for you in this grade. Now, a couple of strikes. The 25,600 call, well, it's added close to on 20 lakh shares. But on the downside, this 25,500 put as well added close to on 37 lakh shares. So just punching in the premiums and matching them with what we saw on Monday with regard to a high as well as with regard to a low. That's the crucial level that I'm looking at. 25,670, very, very close to the highs that we saw on Monday. And going by the options data as well, that's the number you're looking at on the upside. While on the downside, this 25,440, which is closer to the low that we saw a couple of sessions ago. So that's going to be important. That's the broad range you're looking at. But the Nifty bank, I think that's going to be the one that leads the Nifty higher. and coupled with Reliance Industries. And the last two sessions, that 57,100 mark has become the level that you want to go in there and buy. Remember, now there are reports that are indicating even for smaller banks, there's a good amount of demand. There's a divestment of IDBI Bank as well, dues, and it appears that the Nifty Bank is getting its act together. So with the reference point at around 57,100, that's going to be the driver from here on. Finally, the stock that I'm going to be looking at is Vedanta. You know, it's been holding and protecting that 20 DMA for the last many trading sessions. Today, there's a big queue that's coming in there because their demerger scheme is going to be heard in the NCLT. And if, in fact, it gets a green signal, then it's going to be very, very good news. If it doesn't find favor, then that's going to be a bit of a negative. But that's going to be the stock to watch for today's trading session. Let's see what the NCLT has to say, because we know there's a big value unlocking exercise that's currently underway.
Thank you very much for that.